Pleased to be here to share my knowledge and in fact insights on the latest developments in Indonesia, but matter in ASEAN and in larger East Asian regions. I believe in Europe when you talk about Asia, you talk about China and India. I don't blame you because with its rapid economic development, China is so sexy, as it is also so sexy to all countries in Southeast Asia. And this is also reflected in the statistic. 2 years ago, Indonesia EU 28 trade was only 21 point something billion US dollar. In comparisons, of the same year, Indonesia-Malaysia trade was 16 point something with only one country, billion US dollar. With Singapore, over 30 billions, not to mention China, which is close to $100 billion. So, reading these statistics, we tend to ignore each other. And for that matter, I agree with the Director General. He has said that we do not realize of each other's potentials, for that matter, improve the relationships between Indonesia, for that matter ASEAN, with the European Union much better. The fact that Indonesia-EU strategic partnership was delayed in terms of the signing of the documents and furthermore the ratifications reflects there's something wrong in Indonesia, or the ASEAN-EU relationships. Don't forget that in terms of populations, ASEAN has 625 million people, 245 of them are Indonesians, while EU 28 has 506 million. But talking about 625 million in ASEAN, meaning it is a large market with increasing buying power. In the past 10 years, ASEAN countries grew on average by 6%. Last year was, because of the global financial crisis, Eurozone crisis, we grew by 5.2%, and this year also expecting about 5.2%. This is more or less similar to the picture that Indonesia has been enjoying in the past 10 years. You know, Indonesia is now the 16th largest economy, that's why we are in the G20. But according to McKinsey Global Institute report 2 years ago, Indonesia is projected to be the 7th largest economy by, next 2 decades from now. In fact, the recent report by the World Bank, 2 years ago, in terms of purchasing power parity of our GDP, Indonesia now ranks 10, overtaking Italy, which then became 11th largest. But more to come. First, because of the intensity of regional cooperation, integrations, and community buildings. ASEAN has decided in 2003, beginning 2003, but certainly it gave the foundation in the new ASEAN Charter of 2008, what we call ASEAN Community, which rests on its 3 main pillars: political and security community, meaning our commitment to promote democracy, respect of human rights, good governance, and peaceful conflict resolutions. but also ASEAN Economic Community pillars, in which we agree to put in place by end of this year, meaning to me actually starting early next year, because our leaders decided to put in effect this community concept by 31st of December, which is holidays, and plus one with New Year's holidays. So I rather like to talk about ASEAN Economic Community in early 2016. By ASEAN Community, we will have in place free flows of goods, services, capital, skilled labors. Of course, on the free flow of goods, we had since January 2002 ASEAN Free Trade Area, which has allowed us to enjoy the increase of intra-ASEAN trade by about 50%. Now, and then in the past 12 years, we have about 700 traded items among countries in the regions which enjoy 0 to 5% tariff. But under the new ASEAN Community will increase traded items with low tariff to 2,000 items, meaning there's a potential that intra-ASEAN trade would increase more than in the past decade. We have quite an elaborate system in promoting this ASEAN Economic Community concept. We have blueprints, we have a kind of plan of action and scorecards. That's why we are on a good track by end of this year or early next year to put in place all those ASEAN Community concepts, be the political and security, economic, social, and cultural. Why we decided to transform ASEAN from a rather loose association into community? In fact, our leaders decided some years ago to accelerate the attainment of ASEAN Community much earlier from original schedule of 2020 to 2015, because we wish to develop a strong and cohesive ASEAN in order for ASEAN to continue to play its role in the driving seat of a larger regional integration process. Last year I attended a NASPEN Institute conference in Seoul. One of my former colleagues, the former Foreign Minister of Iceland, asked why the three countries more powerful economically than ASEAN, China, Japan, and Korea, followed ASEAN, followed the leadership of ASEAN. It is because of their historical cargo, the memories of the World War. They were not able to promote reconciliations and continue to have recriminations of their past. That's why ASEAN active role in the driving seat for a larger regional integration process. We have in place, in addition to ASEAN Economic Community by early 2016, but also we have various free trade areas scheme, such as ASEAN China, ASEAN Japan, ASEAN Korea, ASEAN Australia, New Zealand, and ASEAN India. And we have agreed, our leaders have agreed 2 years ago to develop what is called RCEP, Regional Economic Partnerships in the regions. I'm sure by this an East Asia-wide free trade area involving some 3.3 billion people, meaning big market, would be soon in place, because we have these 6 free trade arrangements already existed in our regions. We are in a dynamic ASEAN, Indonesia and ASEAN is part of a very dynamic regions of East Asia and the larger East Asia Pacific, which is thought mentions would be the regions of the 21st century. Regions where the center of gravity of the world would be there. Of course, this is mainly seen from the economic perspective. I've mentioned Indonesia is projected to be moving up to 7th largest by 20 years from now, and continue to be 6th by around 2040, as was projected by Professor Vogel from Nobel laureate from Chicago. But together, by 2040, East Asia is expected to contribute to some 65% of the global GDP. EU is projected to have a half of the existing contributions. Japan would lower from 12 to then 3%. It's mainly because of aging. That's why the dynamic of the regions. You should see Indonesia, ASEAN, not only on Indonesia and ASEAN, but see it in the larger context of an increasing or intensified integrations. Very promising, though I've been advocating for more balanced concept of integrations. Yes, the importance of economic cooperation, integration, community building, but nonetheless political and security. We are self-confused, like I believe you are all, when you heard about here are the region of the future, but we cannot cope with incident in South China Sea and East China Sea. That's why increasing tensions, which if we are not careful and manage carefully, it can easily turn into an open conflict. That's why a more balanced architecture of regional cooperation, in which Indonesia has been the active proponents. Look at the another statistic. Now I'm going to turn to Indonesia, as my colleagues has described in such detail on what we expect to do in the next 5 years under the President Joko Widodo's government. But to put in a larger context, Indonesia is now the 16th largest. That's why G20, 45 million members of consuming class, 53 of its population live in cities and contributing to 74% of our GDP, 55 million skilled workers, young workforce in the Indonesian economy, and half trillion market opportunity in consumer services. Certainly this was reflected in the table just presented. What's the key to our economic progress in the past 16 years? You know, like some countries of Europe today, we were struck by severe monetary crisis, which turned into a very ugly multi-dimensional crisis, certainly economic, but also political, security, and social. Our debt to GDP ratio in 1999 was almost 90%. But we pledged ourselves never again Indonesia would be overburdened by high debt. That's why we steadfastly work to decline, to lower our debt to GDP ratio. By this year, it is about 25% of debt to GDP ratio. That's why we were quite resilient. Our economy was quite resilient in the face of the 2008 global financial crisis, or in facing the recent Eurozone crisis. In 2009, following 2008 global financial crisis, Indonesia grew still positive 4.5%, the second fastest after China. And So the key to our resilience is low debt to GDP ratio. I will share with you. 2 weeks after tsunami struck Aceh, I went to Paris. I was received by President Jacques Chirac. He said, I'm very much sympathized with you. You had a multi-dimensional crisis, and by 2004 you were beginning to recover yourself. Now, more than 200,000 of the people were killed. And I want to help. And President Chirac offered a loan, very soft loan, 300 million euro with 1% interest rate, 10 years grace period, and 40 years, to repay in 40 years. I said to President Jacques Chirac, I would report your offer faithfully to my government, to the President and Cabinet. But I said to my own reading, it is very difficult for any government in Indonesia in this era of reformation, as you call it, to take any new loans. Because taking a new loan is sensitive political issue. And President Jacques Chirac wisely said, I understand, I'm a senior politician. But if I can personally advise your government, take it, because I know you have debt with much higher interest rates, 7 to 12%. Take this money, pay your more expensive debt. But I returned to Jakarta and reported to the cabinet, no one was interested. Not the president, not the Minister of Finance, not the cabinet. But when even I had session with our Commission 1 in our parliament, they asked, Foreign Minister, what did you get from your visit to Europe? I tell this story. And they immediately accused me, you're continuing to champion Indonesia to continue to have debt? I said, no, I'm simply telling you, sharing with you how rational is the offer that President Jacques Chirac, with full of sympathy to us. But we are emotional. But thanks to our emotional calculation, we are able to lower our debt to GDP ratio that help promote our economic resilience in the face of multiple global crises. 2 is that it's interesting to learn, perhaps for you, that in a more open and democratic Indonesia, in the past 16 years, we never enjoy, in the 60 years independence of Indonesia, a relative peace and security. And one believes that we will continue to enjoy our peace and security under this more open democratic Indonesia. We solve the problem of armed conflict in Aceh through dialogue and negotiation. Mainly because in an open and democratic Indonesia, we are receptive to new ideas that help us finding solutions of the conflict in Aceh. But likewise in ASEAN, I think the greatest achievement of ASEAN is that in 40 years of its existence, in ASEAN we continue to enjoy relative peace and security. For that matter, allowed us to focus on our time, energy, and economic resources for our economic development. The region didn't spend a single dollar for UN money in order to promote peace and security. And I believe that, of course, I know that we have some small regional internal conflict, but in general we were able to maintain that those conflicts would not develop into an open one. There are the 2 keys why we in Indonesia expect to continue to enjoy our growth, but at the same time also in ASEAN. On the way forward, of course we are on a good track to implement our own national programs under elected democratically elected President Joko Widodo. But in ASEAN, we are on a good track to implement ASEAN community, and for that matter, for ASEAN to continue to play as bridge builder, promoter of regional integrations in the regions. So please to see Indonesia or ASEAN in larger perspective rather than the statistic of 21 billion US dollar in terms of Indonesia EU bilateral trade. And I think EU should find ASEAN as a good partner understanding the important role that ASEAN is playing in our own regions, in the larger East Asia and Asia Pacific. So it is a promising future. The problem is that we are facing is that we do not know each other. Well, perhaps because of our domestic preoccupations, Indonesia, ASEAN are busy with this new intensified integration process like this in East Asia. But you are dealing with the aftermath of the EU zone crisis, with Ukraine's, etc., etc. So there's a danger of us ignoring each other. But I hope that from such a meeting like this would open up that there are opportunities and there are more benefits when EU, Indonesia, and ASEAN together work together. It is basically this message that I will bring to you. I think, moderator, I should end my presentation at this point. Thank you very much.